we spoke, gosh, I can't even work out how many weeks ago, 19th of March, and it's now the 29th of April. And we were talking at that time about your thoughts and findings around virtual teams, how they work, or otherwise remotely in virtual groups. Since that time, well, things have really changed. I think we can agree on that. And we thought we'd catch up again with a view to really thinking about what we are both seeing now.
Yeah.
And seeing what we're both seeing, having a think about it. And maybe we'll do this again in another few weeks, and see what's happening then. So thank you for taking the time.
Of course, pleasure.
So I think really the question we're going to start with is, we are 4 to 6 weeks into lockdown, depending on where you are. And meetings, our interest is in that, what's happening in virtual meetings and the world of Zoom and Teams and online. I certainly, my world is now online. All my meetings pretty much are via Zoom with a tiny number of phone calls. And really what I'm hearing is a sense of exhaustion is coming back from people living in this world. And I wondered what you might have been seeing.
Yeah, very much, and experiencing it, I have to say.
Yeah.
I think, yesterday particularly, I just had one of those days where it felt like it was a real strain for me to kind of smile into the camera. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because it ebbs and flows. It's not all the time, but yesterday I was particularly noticing it and thinking, how much longer do I have to do this? So there is a sense of it. And of course there's, I've seen lots of things through social media that trying to explain what it is, whether it's presence of absence, the size of the group, familiarity with technology, just that we're sitting in an office chair all day, not necessarily getting up and going away, and we just keep coming back to the same place and having meetings all the time. So we lose that transition space between meetings.
Yep.
So I think there's a whole lot of stuff in there. And I think that, we're kind of over the honeymoon period in a way. We're in it. Yeah.
Yes, we've gone beyond the everyone together, bit exciting and new.
Yeah.
To this is how it is now.
Yeah, and how much longer?
Which is certainly still unknown.
I saw a really interesting article about the 3/4 space, and I think it comes from space travel, but the idea that you get 3/4 of the way into a mission, for example, and the end is in sight, and suddenly you hit the low point, the adrenaline, etc., everything goes. And it was being related to the graphs of the coronavirus in Australia and how the flattening of the curve, they're talking about lifting restrictions, it could happen soon, and suddenly everyone's morale, energy just drops down, like, oh my God, like, let's just get through. As opposed to
we get there.
So I thought that was kind of an interesting analogy to make, and I was thinking, is that what it is? I don't know, but this sense of, is that what's going on? Because I keep hearing it from everybody, from everybody I come into contact with, seems to be experiencing the same thing. Yeah.
So it's interesting, that idea of, people wanting to frame this. I keep hearing about pre and post COVID. That idea of framing it to help us manage the load of coping with this new stuff. And maybe it points to an idea that consultant from INSEAD was reminding us of recently, which is transition naturally involves loss, but we know something has lost. Is it permanent? Are we able to, can we even talk about it at this time when everyone's being you know, got their best face on, that, you know, rustling up a smile for a meeting you don't have the energy for. So I think, what do you make of how people are, you know, I think we both have been through that process of doing a day, getting to the end of the day and being absolutely exhausted. I wonder how that's showing up out there in the online meeting world.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I think I want to pick up on just a little bit of your question that's got two parts. So one is the loss, and how do we deal with the loss? And you know, I have been thinking about Freud's concept of mourning and melancholia, and that mourning requires us to mourn both the loved lost object and the hated lost object, you know, and that if we idealize it but we don't embrace what we didn't like about it, then we can't move on, so we're stuck in this sort of melancholic position. I'm kind of curious about, you know, people saying let's get back to normal, but are we actually going to do that, or can we kind of acknowledge what wasn't necessarily working and in order to create a new normal? So I think people are talking about what will the new normal be, but it's like how will we even find out that new normal unless we can really look at both the good and bad of what we had before, you know, for instance. So I think there's that part. And then I think you know, putting on the game face or putting on the brave face or what have you. I think, you know, I haven't seen a lot of conflict online. So I kind of think
interesting.
And I think, well, where does that go? Where does that aggression go? And does it come out somewhere else, or is there something happening in the dynamics? But overtly, there's not a lot of aggression. And similarly, there's not really a lot of, it's really hard to, I notice from my own experience, to show empathy in a way, because that whole, you know, the lack of eye contact working with people. So it's kind of, I could look at you on my screen, but I'm not looking at the camera in order to look at the camera so you can see my eyes. I'm not looking at your eyes. And I think it's a really, you know, physiological aspect of humans, that we have this seeking behavior linked with our limbic system, and we're always seeking. And so seeking the eyes of another in order to convey information really is quite difficult. So I kind of think that, you know, so then that does affect in a way how we relate to each other. And so then often it becomes, I feel like meetings can often become really task focused, as opposed to, well, let's think about the people in these roles and what's their experience and how are they working with it. Sometimes that gets forgotten, I guess. So, you know, thinking about leaders putting on brave faces and what have you. I mean, the other part of the leader's role is to provide containment. So how do they provide containment in
and I wonder if it may be, so containment, it's interesting that the role of the leader as a container for the anxieties of the teams and the groups and the organization, when it is unprecedented times. And so if the leader is being the kind of pot where everyone's anxiety is going, where does that go for them? And so you hope that they have something in place to help them actually be able to unpack it a bit. I mean, I've done work in reflective practice, you know, working with people in reflective practice, and really and sometimes it's called that, sometimes it's coaching, sometimes it's supervision, but an opportunity to actually talk about the experience of it, and with an outside person, you know, who can kind of help you think about it and kind of make sense of the experience and what it means in relation to the work that you're doing. And that sense-making process has a way of helping a leader contain their experience, and then they can go and contain other people's experience. Get more.